Oh, hello and welcome. I am Ellie Pascal, and this is the Doing It Deliciously embodiment retreat, where we are opening to our work, to our rest, to our healing, and to our play. And we're finding out what happens when we truly do things our body's way. Because, my friends, our bodies hold the key, and we've been mistrusting them for millennia, pushing on, numbing up, and trying to shred our to-do lists before breakfast. And this is insanity. And our bodies need and they want something else. Us to do our lives in ways that feel truly like aliveness, that feel like regulation and calm, that feel like love, that feel like truth and presence and juiciness. So in this extraordinary space that we're in here today, let us pool our embodied knowings and bring more of this deliciousness into every level of our lives. And I am so happy to say that here supporting us to do this right now is Lynn Fraser. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you for having me, Ellie. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you are. Yeah, so guys, Lynn holds a special place in my heart because a year ago I was lucky enough, Lynn, to discover your daily practices. And I've been on your Zoom sessions every day almost for the past year, and it's made a huge impact on my life, and I'm deeply grateful. And for those of you who maybe don't know Lynn's work, I'll say a few more words now so that you can start to get to know her and who she is and what she's bringing to our world. So yeah, Lynn Fraser is a meditation teacher who supports people healing trauma through somatic mindfulness inquiry and building resilience in the nervous system. She is a senior teacher in the Himalayan yoga meditation tradition and founder of the somatic mindfulness Stillpoint method of healing trauma. Lynn has been interviewed on major podcasts and summits in her field and is the founder of the Radical Recovery Summit, Innovation in Healing Trauma and Addiction Through a Social Justice Lens, in which she's interviewed leaders and innovators in her field, including Gabor Mate, Deb Dana, Prentice Hemphill, and many, many more. And you can join Lynn for her online group sessions and courses, her live guided free daily practices, and for guided practices on the Insight Timer. Oh, beautiful. Thank you for being here with us, Lynn.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so everybody, this is a space in which the body comes first. So we're going to begin now. We have a treat. Lynn is going to guide us in an embodiment practice. So if it's okay for you, Lynn, could you just tell us a little bit about what it is we're going to do and then go ahead?
Sure, right. So one of the things that happens with learning about trauma is that we learn that trauma is stored in our body. There's a quote I use from Dr. Gabor Mate all the time, that the effect of trauma is that we disconnect from ourselves, our sense of value, and from the present moment. So when we know that, then what? So we have all of this uncomfortable, sometimes scary sensations in our body. The nervous system has a negativity bias and is always trying to keep us safe. And our nervous system communicates with us through sensations and energy. If we feel any kind of threat or scared, then we will have thoughts that reflect that. So we often get into anxious loops of thinking, compulsive thinking, catastrophic thinking. And those aren't permanent. We can really change the field of our mind, the sense of who we are. We can change our thinking, and there's a lot of ways that we can do that, but one of them is to have a stronger, more resilient nervous system so that we're not generating all of that type of thought. the practice today is going to be to a somatic mindfulness practice in our body, but also to notice the sensations and energy that are there. And maybe a little bit later on, we can do some of the practices, the tools we might do in order to work with catastrophic thinking and those types of things. But this practice will just be kind of an opportunity to come into our body, make a bit of friends with what's happening in our body, and widen our window of tolerance. Nobody enjoys feeling tight and contracted or having a feeling of doom in our body. And that's generated by the nervous system not feeling safe. Our nervous system remembers everything that's ever happened to us, and it doesn't remember all the good things because there's not as much of an evolutionary purpose for that. Really, its priority is to keep our bodies safe and alive. And so that's what kind of takes over. And our nervous system is not a very good match for the world we live in now. So these kinds of practices can be really helpful in honoring what's happening, recognizing what's happening, and also to sharpen our neuroception, our assessment of, am I safe in this moment? How much of what's happening in my body is because of this moment, and how much is from the past? And it's very, very much influenced from the past. And we can be here in this present moment through these practices. And over time, we get to know in our bones that we're okay, we're safe. And I love that you've been coming to the daily practice for every day for a year, because it takes a while for us to get that really embodied sense of, I'm okay. If I get disturbed a bit, I can come back into regulation. I can come back into my body and my breath. So that's a little short practice that we're going to do today as we start.
Yeah, wonderful. Beautiful. Thanks, Lynn. Please go ahead.
All right. So one of the first things we do always is we check in and see where we're at. So physically, if anybody wanted to lie down or lean back or get themselves settled into a more comfortable position, that's always a helpful thing to do. If you think you might get cold, you might get a blanket or a sweater or something. We're not trying to force our body into stillness. We're trying to become aware of what's happening in our body. And then as the hypervigilance in our mind settles, as our nervous system settles, then our body will naturally become more still. So let's start with noticing your physical body. Bring your body into your awareness from head to toes. Just hearing what I was talking about a little while ago about trauma stored in the body can be something that we could notice right now. Do I feel sensations, energies? Did my mind get kind of stirred up thinking about that? And then we can bring our attention in from everything else now, just for several minutes, and focus on our body. Notice if you could allow yourself to be supported by the chair or the floor, the environment that you're in. And what that might involve is letting your shoulders get heavier, taking a few deeper breaths, release tension out of your neck and shoulders. Noticing what's here. Let's start at the forehead and eyebrows. We tend to carry a lot of worry in our forehead. So you might lift your eyebrows up and then let them release. Just for a moment, let's pay attention to thoughts that are going through the mind at the same time as we're noticing that we could soften the muscles of the forehead and eyebrows. The thoughts come through the mind as images, words, sounds, video clips, still pictures. And as we bring our attention to the thoughts in the mind, that has a lot of connection with what's going on in our body and in our breath. We're just doing a temperature reading, so to speak. What's the general feel? Not as much the content, but does your mind feel fairly settled? Is it kind of easy to relax your forehead? or are you being drawn into thoughts? As you're breathing in, keep your attention focused on your forehead and eyebrows. And then as you're breathing out, let that soften a little bit more. You can soften the muscles around your eyes, down into your mouth, your cheeks. Notice the sensation of air in the nostrils. And notice if it feels okay to take a few deeper breaths. Sometimes when we're feeling under threat, we tighten up, we hold our breath. And so we don't want to be pushy or aggressive. We're just noticing. Is it okay to take a few deeper breaths? Feel the coolness of the air as it comes in through the nose, into the throat. And if that feels like a bit too much, then we could let go of the breath awareness, focus on the body. And then notice your mouth and jaw. If you were to move your lower jaw around a bit, that might help release tension in the hinges of the jaw. And see if you could rest your mouth so that your upper and lower teeth aren't touching. You're not clenching your teeth. Put a bit of space in there. Let your tongue soften and be at rest. And also notice your vocal cords, the front of your throat. We can let our tongue and vocal cords be still. That helps to still the mind. Our sense of speech is part of how we engage with people and is part of how we protect ourselves. So just for now, we're letting that move to the background, letting ourselves soften there. From the forehead, eyebrows, and eyes down into the mouth and jaw. And let's move into the neck and shoulders. If you wanted, you could bring your shoulders up, a little micro movement as you breathe in, and then exhale, let them soften a little more. And bring your attention to the back of your neck and then into those large muscles of your upper back. Often what happens in our upper back, our neck, and our shoulders is that we're bracing ourselves. We could notice, we could allow those muscles to soften a bit. You could shrug off any burdens, lift your shoulders, let them release. Just become aware what's happening in the muscles of the neck and the upper back. But what does it feel like energetically? Are there sensations there? Are you bracing yourself? And could you allow that to release a bit? And bring your attention around to the front of your chest as well. What are the sensations in the front of your chest? So we have these large muscles in the front and back that start at the center, go out to the sides. They operate the shoulders and the arms. And we use our arms in the world as we move about. We do our duties, we cook meals, we hug people. We do all of our activities with our arms and hands, a lot of them. And they're also a way that we might protect ourselves. So they're very connected with the nervous system as well. Just for a moment, notice the sensations, if any, in the palms of your hands. Notice your fingers and fingertips. And then let your awareness flow along the sides of your neck, your shoulders, down through your arms. And let go of any bracing or tightness. Let your arms and shoulders relax. Several breaths, you could allow that softening to deepen. And then let's check in with the stomach area. We might notice where in our body are we moving with the breath. When we're alarmed about something, we're often holding our breath, and sometimes we develop habits. We just kind of get tight in our body. We have a very shallow breath, or we hold our breath. And that's quite alarming to the nervous system. It's a signal that there's something wrong, even though in this moment in time, there is not. We're safe right now. So notice what happens when you pay attention to your chest and to your stomach area. Are there sensations? Is there energy there? And whereabouts in your body is there movement with your breath? We might notice that there's more movement in the upper chest if we're breathing more in the chest. But the remedy for that is to come down into your stomach area and let your belly soften. So we don't need to direct our body's breath. Our body knows how to breathe. We interfere with that natural calming breath when we're tense and when we have hypervigilance in our mind. Notice that. Notice the whole body again for a moment, and notice your legs and feet as well as your arms and legs. Are you relatively comfortable and still? Are you feeling kind of edgy or jittery? You could move, you could stretch, you could do some shaking. With this kind of a somatic relaxation and inquiry, we're looking around, getting to know what's going on inside. And it's okay to move our body around if that's what our body wants to do. And then sometimes it will come into more of a settled feeling or a stillness. So when we were working in that awareness of the chest and the stomach area, we notice physical movement, like our belly or stomach area might expand or get a little bit of a rise as we breathe in, and then we soften as we breathe out. So we might notice the physicalness. We might also notice energy or sensation. When we're talking about stored trauma, we're often talking about maybe a feeling of constriction in the throat or a heaviness in the chest, some kind of anxious movement in the gut. So right now, we don't have to figure anything out or solve anything. We could just notice that maybe here it might be quite soft, it might be kind of intense. And we can notice the whole of our body. We can notice our breath. We could let go of tension in our shoulders. We could soften our mouth. Be aware of your whole body. One of the ways that we can work with the stillness in our body and with the energy and sensations is to open our eyes as well. So if you're feeling like right now I don't want to have my eyes closed, it feels a little bit like too much in here, then you could do something to shift that. You could open your eyes and look around. Our eyes communicate directly with our nervous system. So if we look around or you look behind you, your eyes will let your brain know there's nothing here to be concerned about right now. And then you might come back into a softer gaze or closed eyes. You might stretch or move your body as we're getting ready to finish the practice. Take a few deeper breaths if that feels good. And then just for a moment, notice what you observed. Was there anything unusual or anything different in your experience? Sometimes we might have something come into awareness that we want to work with a little bit more later, and that's fine too. When you're ready, open your eyes and come out of the practice.
Mm. Lynn, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love doing those practices.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Yeah, absolutely. And for everybody, for all of you lovelies taking part in this moment, I invite you now, as Lynn and I move into a space that is somewhat more logical, more worded. We're going to have a chat. I invite you to stay present with your body to the degree that feels okay for you. And that for you, it could look like having a hand on your heart space and belly, just to remember that here you are in this alive vessel. It might even look like keeping your eyes closed at points or throughout our talking. And the invitation here is to really stay in touch with the truth that lives here in what you feel and see what that's like. How is your body responding to what's talked about? And what might you need to take care of that? Hopefully, as Lynn and I talk now, you're going to get some inspiration about that. I hope it's really supportive for you guys. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you. Lynn, as I tuned in last night to the fact that we were going to meet today, and um, I began to feel extra excited and quite moved, really, because for me, the trauma work piece is so very important. I know that my own experience with it has been that there was a real limit on how much I could do things deliciously before I worked to heal my nervous system, because without me even knowing it, it was shut down a lot of the time. And I was working from a place of anxiety that I didn't even know was there. So thank you for what you're doing. And I'm curious at this moment to ask you, how did you come into doing this work? What brought you to it?
Well, there's two components of it. The first would be meditation. And 30 years ago, I was in year 7 of working for an AIDS organization. And it was 1993. And back then it was very difficult. If you got HIV, you went on to get AIDS, and almost everyone died. So I was 7 years into working with a really intense environment. And somebody suggested, I know a meditation teacher. You should go and check that out. And I did. And I just fell in love. I felt so at home with meditation and breathing. A couple of years later, I added on yoga. But I really started to work with the compulsive nature of my mind. I had a lot of catastrophic thinking going on, and I had not much awareness of how the mind worked, how much chatter there was in there. And I got very deeply involved with, daily meditation and learning more about the philosophy and the psychology and the breath and how our bodies work. And I went very deeply into that for several years, about 15 years. I had a heart opening.
Mm.
Uh, I had a very traumatic teen years, and I had been pretty shut down as I went through, my 20s and 30s. I was in freeze a lot. I wasn't as engaged in my life as I am now because I was in a nervous system state of a freeze. So people go into fight responses sometimes, and those people are a little bit harder for us to be around when they're in a fight response or a flight. We're just kind of not there, either physically or emotionally. And then in a shutdown state, you just kind of drift through life. You're not really engaged. You're not really on your own side. I was in a relationship for a long time that I shouldn't have been. And so as I started to meditate and really get to know myself, things started to clarify. I started to become more engaged. It was very healing in an indirect way for my nervous system. And then 11 or 12 years ago, I came across somatic inquiry. And that was when I really started to deepen into healing trauma. So instead of, observing or witnessing thoughts in the mind and then going into stillness, which is very helpful, but I was also starting to pick apart Okay, thoughts are actually images or words or sounds. If I have a disturbing thought, there are tools that I can use to work with those thoughts. Um, and I don't have to be at the mercy of the thoughts in my mind. So I had a lot of releases and opening in my body through yoga, but there was still a lot of stored trauma. I had a really tight upper back and neck. My massage therapist would go, "You feel like cement back here." But it was because I was always bracing. And that released, and a lot of I kind of woke up in my body as I started to work with a lot of that energy. And then I started working with other people. And, as a meditation teacher, I know a lot about the mind, and as a yoga teacher about the body. And also, just as I became more alive, I love the topic of your summit, the title of it, because it really speaks to coming alive. Life can be hard and it can be delicious, and we need to have both. And well, we don't need the hardness, but we get that anyway. But we need to have that capacity to come to life again. And so that's kind of a short version of how I got here.
Yeah, thank you so much for telling us that, Lynn. Yeah, it's really good to hear. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words in case there's anybody here who hasn't come across the notion before that trauma does get held in the body, how that is, why that is, what does that really mean to you?
Hmm. So when we think about a child, so a lot of our trauma comes from childhood. We need to have a safe enough environment and enough connection that we feel like we're not on our own. Because children's brains are not developed enough to figure out how to regulate themselves. When a baby cries, they need to be picked up, cuddled, fed, probably. But also, we just need to have that regulating body. We need a warm mammal body because we're mammals. And if we don't get that, then our brains don't develop in an optimal way. And what are we going to do? If you're 7 or 8 years old and you're being bullied at school and there's nobody around to help, or you're being told to man up if you're a boy or don't be a sissy, then what are you going to do with that? We don't have the brain development or the life experience to figure it out. And we just kind of do the best we can, but oftentimes that overwhelm gets stored in our body. And it can happen at any age. But as we're developing, as our brains and nervous systems are developing, we might develop more of a neural network. The brains might develop more for protection rather than connection. So we go through life then feeling we feel it in our body, but like, I don't trust people. People are going to hurt me. And so then we hold back, or we have anxious thoughts, or we have social anxiety. And then we don't have the opportunity because we don't have the window of tolerance of sometimes I'm going to be connected and it's going to be amazing. And other times the person's going to be rude or disconnected or they're not going to like me. But it's not going to land on me so much because I've already figured out that it's not about me. If somebody's being nasty, it's about them. And we have these the way that child's brain works is that if we don't feel loved and supported, it's scary for one thing, because that's how people evolve to survive. We need to be in connection. And we'll try to do anything we can to maintain as good enough connection as we can with our parents or caregivers. So the way that happens inside is we feel, well, I don't feel very loved. I don't feel very supported. Therefore, I must be unlovable. There's something wrong with me. So, a big part of healing trauma then is to follow the clues that are in our body, because that kind of a feeling is lodged in our body as energy as well, with the associated memories and sensations. So, it might be something that happened a lot that was, the microaggressions that just happened so much, it was chronic. But at some point, we just know that there's no point in me reaching out to my parents because they're not going to be okay. They're they're too busy, they're too distracted, or they're abusive, or they have a mental illness. Whatever reason might be, I'm on my own. And then that's when the trauma really gets stored in our body. So it gets stored as this uneasiness in our gut or this heaviness in our heart. Or if you were to be witnessing and watching how that works, and I do this all the time, I'll notice, oh, suddenly I feel like there's a little heaviness in my chest. What just happened? And I'll almost always, it'll be some thought came in about something that feels, a little heavy. And oftentimes it's something from the past, but it's often triggered by something that's happening right now. So if we look at, how difficult it is to be in the world around all of these very activated nervous systems, since COVID, it was pretty difficult before then, but since COVID, a lot of people are feeling really at the end of their rope. It's hard to regulate when other people around us are so dysregulated. There's so much anxiety and fear that's promoted in the news and in social media. And we want to care and we want to be open hearted. We don't want to shut down. And yet we have what's happening now lands on what's unresolved from the past. Mm. So working with how can I get to know what's going on in my body? How can I connect with that 7-year-old or with that 13-year-old and let them know they're not in charge anymore. They're not on their own anymore. I'm here. I'm an adult. I'm more resourced now. When I was 13, I couldn't get a job and get into my own apartment. I had, most of us have to stay in the environments that we're in. And that's not the case anymore. So this mindfulness somatic inquiry around what's going on in my body and what does that have to do with my past? Is there a part of me in there that's really scared, that feels like the only way I'm going to make it through this is to fight everybody? Or I'm never going to be able to relax enough to really connect with someone because every time I have, the mind exaggerates that negativity bias. Every time, that's not true, but that's what comes to mind. And so it's quite a practice to be aware of that. And then what really happens when we tune into the energy and sensations, sometimes we feel like we're getting dragged back into traumatic memory. And so these mindfulness practices to stay present right now are so important because right now in the safety of this moment, we have the capacity to be present with whatever the sensations are, whatever the embodied trauma is. And that's how we release it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Staying present with the sensations right now, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I heard you say talk about the power of getting to know our nervous system, getting to know our body, something really lit up inside of me. I think there's so many wonderful tools and we're so blessed to be receiving your practice. And, I know we could talk a little bit more about tools that people can use in the moment if they need. And also, I think from my experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, for me, it's just been a process of patience and gentleness and time, and of just spending time listening in ways that before I began to understand it's not always easy, but frankly, what a gold mine of truth and connection my body is when I come to her, instead of how I was before, always busy and avoiding without even knowing that I was avoiding. Coming here and listening, even if it's just a few minutes more every day than we used to before, it's so transformative. It's like oh, here is this, I can befriend to myself. And
yes,
any relationship, I will take time and listen. And
that's the key, is to develop a relationship with ourselves. So when we're young and we are feeling overwhelmed, we're just trying to make it through. When we disconnect from ourselves, then we don't have a relationship with ourselves. And that's something that we can turn to and work with at any moment. So doing these practices to increase resilience in our nervous system helps, and that we have more confidence that we can come back into awareness, into regulation. But one of the things that really attracted me to meditation was the concept that we are basically good. And in the West, oftentimes with original sin and the way that's been interpreted, and then adding on the core deficiency beliefs of I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm bad somehow. Those two things are really on the opposite end. And so to really get into a relationship with, I'm going to assume that I'm basically good. And that is true. That's certainly what I found to be true. What as we get into our nervous system and our younger parts that are scared, what we're finding is not some evil person in there. What we're finding is someone who's been hurt and someone who needs our care and our attention, our patience, our compassion. So even when we've done something that we're ashamed of, or that something we look at now and go, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, we can bring our own goodwill and our own compassion to that and understand. I did a lot of things when I was a teenager that I wouldn't do now. Some of them were really risky as well, but a lot of them involved drinking and drugs and just being really desperate. I was so desperately unhappy, and I was just trying to make it through, which I did. So I can be grateful for that. And I don't shame myself for any of that anymore because I really get how isolated I was and how I really didn't have the support of regulating adults. I had a bunch of other teenagers who were also in distress. That forms a bit of a connection. But now, any one of us can reach back and go, I want to know who this is. I want to heal that part of me that still feels scared. And we can do that.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I have such
Yeah.
an expansion in my heart space as I hear you say that. I want to know who this is, and we
Yeah.
can do that. Yeah, absolutely. And when I heard you say your words just now, that experience of being an adult who is just trying to make it through,
Mm.
I'm curious if there's anybody taking part right now who thinks, yeah, I feel like that quite a lot of the time, more of the time than I would really like.
Right.
What would your advice be in terms of just that first gentle, loving step to start to turn that ship a little bit from that kind of hamster wheel, anxious or shut down experience to coming that little more present with a little more deliciousness, whether that deliciousness is simply just a bit less numb or a bit less panicked, a bit less disconnected? How would you invite somebody to begin?
I think one of the first things is to acknowledge that life is pretty hard for most people right now. There's a lot of collective trauma, whether it's the environment or the way things shifted after COVID. People have difficult financial circumstances, but also we have a lot of systemic oppression, whether it's gender oppression or racial oppression, or we have a lot of systems that are not set up for our benefit and that, of course, we're going to struggle with. So acknowledging that, I think, is helpful, that it's not my personal fault that I have hypervigilance in my nervous system. There's reasons for all of that. And I can track back and go, okay, as a child, these things were happening. As an adult, now these are my circumstances. And we can have some acknowledgement that it's hard and that our nervous systems need something more than what we have often. So to build that resilience in our nervous system is something we can all do. I would start with some kind of relaxation. Often breathing can be very helpful. Like there's practices that can interrupt the panic that's happening. So like cyclic physiological sighing, for instance, is a practice of a deep double inhale, a long, slow exhale. And for a couple of minutes, even a couple of breaths, that will help to reset us and bring us back to this moment in time. So we can develop and learn a lot of those tools, which is helpful. As we do that, then we start to build more resilience in our nervous system. We have more capacity then to be kind with ourselves. Deb Dana and Stephen Porges with the polyvagal system talk about we literally cannot access compassion for ourselves if we are in fight, flight, or freeze. coming back to regulating the nervous system will cure 90% of what's going on, because we can't access our higher level self, stillness in the mind, relaxation in the body when we're in fight, flight, or freeze. Coming into that, knowing how the nervous system works, knowing how ordinary trauma works, the ordinary trauma of everyday life. So it doesn't have to be a big T trauma in order for us to be alarmed. And then to work with from there, as we get more regulated, then things open up for us. But to start with, every one of us could do something that would be helpful for our nervous system, and relaxing the body and working with the breath are two simple ones. And then working with the compulsive thoughts in the mind. Would this be a good time to show a couple of tools for that?
Yeah, great.
Okay. So one thing that happens is we get into kind of a trance with compulsive thinking. So we can see I've got a lot of anxiety because I'm scared. I'm not sure how things are going to work out. So when we have a lot of anxiety, then we often develop a catastrophic thinking pattern about the future. So those thoughts might be, what if I get sick? I'm going to be in the hospital. We might go all the way to people standing around our grave, and some of it might even have a basis in reality, but a lot of it is what we're worried is going to happen. So what I do is to try to be mindful of the thoughts in my mind. So pay attention, like witness them. And when I get caught in a train of thought, which we all do sometimes, and which I do much, much less now than I ever used to, then I intervene right away. So it might be I need to do a breathing practice or something, or I need to open my eyes and look around and go, that thing that I'm afraid of is actually not here right now. Maybe I had a test at the doctor and I'm waiting for the results. I don't have the results yet. Or maybe I have the results, but I don't know what's going to happen. And so to acknowledge that a lot of things do worry us, and it's not helpful to go into catastrophic thinking about the future. So one of the ways we can do is just this simple tapping on our forehead. And there's a lot of EFT practices that have different patterns and stuff, but just this to bring your attention away from the thought and into the sound, the sensation of the tapping. That can help to kind of interrupt. And if you're in a meeting or something where you can't do that, you could tap on your knee for a moment, or wiggle your toes or something that will help you to go, oh, okay, I'm not actually in that train of thought. I'm here. But one of the most powerful practices that I've ever worked with this is to take the image. So with your eyes open, the issue with images and with thoughts is that it drags us into the past. So having our eyes open can help us to remember, oh, actually, I'm not in my childhood home. I'm here in this moment, in this place. And then put an image into like a frame on the other side of the room. I have a very convenient picture that I always use, but notice that I have an image in my mind. So there might be an image of words. It could be someone's face. It could be anything. And put that image over there on the wall on the other side of the room. Put it in a frame, and then notice that there's space on the outside of the frame. And then take your eyes around that empty space 2 or 3 times in one direction, and then 2 or 3 times in the other direction. Part of what's going on there is bilateral brain stimulation when we're moving our eyes in a circle around it. Part of it is that it's over there. We can see that it's over there. Another way that we can work with images too is to put ourselves in the picture. So if I'm looking at, I'm at work and I'm in a meeting and the boss is saying something, I could see, mostly we see it out of our own eyes, but it feels a lot more immediate, like we're actually in that situation. So if you could back that up and see yourself sitting there and see the rest of the people as well, then that helps our brain to know, actually, that wasn't happening. It's not happening right now. So anything that we can do to break that trance of anxiety and catastrophic thinking will help reduce the level of hypervigilance in our nervous system. And it will come back into something that's more accurate. So there's a lot of different ways to work with what comes up, but those are a couple of really simple tools to notice thoughts. Yeah. And then after we've noticed the thoughts, then we might notice, I feel really edgy in my body, or I feel this heaviness in my heart or something. So with sensations, then we can also do something with that. We can look and say, okay, how would I describe that? So some people have a very visual mind and they might have an image of a big iron bar in their chest. Other people, it's more of a sensation. But we could look at the sensation and say, is this moving? Is it still? Is it hot or cold? Is it, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? What are the edges of it? Does it go into the whole world? It never does. Sometimes it feels like it goes out to the edge of our body or even outside. But oftentimes it's something, it's really in a specific location. And then from there, we can, if we have an image, we can look at the image the same way, put it in a frame. But then we're getting, we're pulling back and we're able to witness. I have a sensation. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like. And then from then we can ask, well, what's this about? Why are you here? Because that's the stored trauma trying to signal us. I'm worried about something. I have this history of, you could be shamed if you're in a meeting with your boss, like, whoa, that's dangerous. But then we come into our regulated self, our regulated nervous system, and then we have a lot more access to our wisdom and our tools.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing those. They're so powerful. And as I hear you talk about working with the thoughts, working with the sensations in the body, and you use that word, we can be in that trance some of the time before we
Yes.
acknowledge, oh, there's that thought in my head, or there's that feeling in my body. And my experience of trauma in my own being and witnessing it, or as my head understands it and what I'm witnessing in people around me, what I believe I see happening is, when we notice the thought, or we subconsciously notice the thought that says I'm not safe, or the sensation in the body that says panic, panic, panic. I
Right.
think so many of us, and we see this on a global scale, what's happened is, whether that original panic stems from something that happened in this lifetime, or maybe it's even some epigenetic trauma that's been passed along in our lineage, who knows? We've created a story in our head that says, oh, this is the reason that I get these feelings of anxiety. And it might be something like, my lineage, Lynn, it's all about, it's because there's so much on my to-do list, and I'm
Right.
so busy and I'm so stressed and I never get everything done. And so therefore the logic is, then if I clear my to-do list, then the anxiety can go away. And it works to a degree. It's like,
Yeah.
smoking a cigarette, like, well, I'll have a cigarette and it'll make it go away, right? But we're never just stopping and going, oh, precious body, like, oh, I feel you, like, this is this
Yeah.
sensation in this moment, and how can I be with just what I feel, and let that be as manageable or maybe unmanageable as the sensation feels, but right size it, like, in
Right.
this moment, this is what's here, this thought or
Yeah.
this sensation, and be with that.
And as we practice, we become more confident that we can stay in the present moment.
Mm.
So that's a lot of the fear of going into the sensations in our body, is we fear that, and sometimes this is from experience too, is that once we start down that train of thought, or once we get into that sensation, we're not going to be able to stay present in this moment. And then it's going to be a flashback. It's going to be really difficult. Sometimes we can stay in those states for a long time. So to have some practices that we do when we're relatively stable, like coming every day for a daily practice, or however people might do that, or knowing that if I start to get really wound up, I'm not gonna go out for a smoke. I'm gonna go stand outside and breathe, or I'm gonna, pet my dog, or I'm gonna, like, we just have to learn how to do this.
Mm.
And it's not that hard. These are really simple practices. But when we start getting kind of drawn into that, we forget. So that's why we need to practice on a regular basis. Practicing will help us become more resilient. It'll lower the level of hypervigilance. But then we're also more likely to remember to do something when we're panicking.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And would you say that there's kind of a dance here, a balance to be found between being with the sensation to the degree that feels okay, and sometimes, as you said, it it can be scary. It can be, I have a feeling that this it's a bit too much to be with this sensation, or it has been.
Right.
And finding for ourselves where that edge is of going, okay, so I can notice this sensation or this pattern of this thought, and actually in this moment, the way that I can open to some more regulation is not necessarily to focus on it, but to go and
Right.
resource, pet the dog,
Right.
go walk on the ocean, go
Yeah.
be with the trees.
Right. And so part of our skill in this is recognizing when I need to back up. So we can titrate, we can go in a little, develop some capacity, go in a little bit more. Or Peter Levine talks about titrating or pendulating. We can go right in, we can come right back out. And one of the things, maybe we could do another little practice that I think is really helpful. So this is I learned about from Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Labs at Stanford University in the States. And it's cyclic physiological sighing. And it was they did a bunch of research and they found that this was better than meditating, better than box breathing, better than a bunch of other things. So what it is a deep inhale through the nose and then another inhale and then a long, slow exhalation through the mouth, like you're breathing out through a thin straw. So let's try that for several breaths. So deep inhale. And again. And then long, slow exhale. And as you're breathing out, let your whole body soften. Breathe out as long as you can comfortably, and then breathe in again. Deep double inhale. When we breathe out like we're breathing out through a thin straw, it really lengthens the exhale, which is really helpful. Also, when we've done that deep double inhale, we often have a bit of lift in the shoulders, so we can let that release as well when we're exhaling. You could relax your forehead, eyebrows and eyes, mouth and jaw, neck and shoulders. Let a wave of relaxation come through your body. One more. And there are some other ones too, like holding your own hands. Use a sense of touch to bring yourself back into this moment and feel that support. Or putting your hands on your heart, like you mentioned earlier. There's so many ways that when we just pause, we can come back into this moment. And sometimes the moment is the right moment to go more deeply into connection with those sensations and perhaps witnessing the memories that come up. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes the best thing is to just offer ourselves that sense of connection and that feeling of, I don't have to change, I don't have to perform. I could just let myself be. And that opens up so much aliveness. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you so much. I know that you have a beautiful free gift that people can access in order to journey with these concepts and these tools and these practices a bit more. Could you tell us what that is?
Well, there's two. And then I also offer a lot of free resources on an ongoing basis. And the daily practice is free, and the Sunday community class is also free. But the free gifts are there's a book that I wrote. It's a PDF of Friends with Your Mind, How to Stop Torturing Yourself with Your Thoughts. And that has a lot of these practices in it and it's a short, kind of concise book. You can pick it up and kind of go to whichever area you want. And so there's a PDF of that. And then there's also a PDF of an ebook, Healing Ordinary Trauma, which also has a lot of those, just understanding how trauma works, some of the tools that we can use to work with compulsive thinking. And I would really encourage people there's a lot out here right now about trauma. There's a lot of people that are working in a more trauma-informed way. And so these tools are really simple a lot of the time, like cyclic sighing or holding your own hand or looking around the room for cues of safety. Those are things we can all do. And to really encourage people to learn a little bit about, you don't have to become a trauma expert, but learn a little bit about it and then really cultivate that willingness to be connected with ourselves and to be kind and be on our own side, which for many of us, nobody has ever been on our side, but we could be on our own side. And that's beautiful when we are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, everyone. So the link to the course and the book that Lynn just spoke about is beneath this video. And also Lynn's website link is as well. And if you go there, that's right, isn't it, Lynn? They can find their way to your daily practice and the other. I mean, guys, Lynn's website is an Aladdin's cave of beautiful trauma-informed resources. So yeah, thank you for that. That's great. Yeah.
Well, it's wonderful to be able to do this work and to offer this work out into the world. And I would really encourage people to follow your heart on this and to find things that are helpful, because our nervous systems got dysregulated and we can come back into regulation and we can come back into more strength and resilience. And then what opens up is that deliciousness that you're talking about, right? We're alive. We can experience joy. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I always feel it's important to say as well that my experience, I don't know what yours is, Lynn, but is that even though the parts and times of the healing the trauma in my body coming back into my body have been really hard, really hard. All of it, even the hard stuff, there's a beauty to it that I wouldn't change, because all of it has been me coming back into relationship with myself. And the distress that was there, sometimes I was aware of and sometimes that was kind of muted before, was so horrid, of being disconnected from this soft animal of the body that I'm in, and also there's been times with this journey which has been so delicious in and of itself, even right at the beginning, those moments of, pockets of aliveness, or even just the realization that I was on the road to that, and the glimpses of, wow, maybe, my inner child can have some more space again, or whatever it was. To me, this journey it's so hard at times and so magical, like visceral human magic.
Yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
I
We
remember
think
when
it's
I
going to be
first
just hard.
done.
We think it's going to be just hard, but it's not.
Right.
It's hard and it's all of this other as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you, Lynn, as we begin to close here, this is probably my final question. It's my perception, and I think from what I've heard you say, to at least some degree, it's yours as well, that a lot of what we see in the world in terms of the challenge, whether it's the wars or the systems that don't serve us, are coming from the beings who are disconnected. There's so much trauma, and it could never just be individual, because we are not individual. We are interacting all the time, and we are living in the world that we co-create and that our ancestors co-created, and it's all here, and it's so wonderful that we're coming back to regulation and to awareness of the trauma work, and there's also still so much trauma present in the world at this time. And I'm curious for you, for a moment, if we took a breath and say, one day, if and when we come to the place where there is oceans more regulation in almost all, if not all, of the systems of the humans, the precious humans on this planet, if we were all far, far, far more regulated, or I will say when we are, I don't know, it's going to be decades, centuries, millennia, but I know that we're going there. What do you think that world will look like or feel like for us?
That's a really interesting question. I think it will look a lot like our best moments now, where we're connected and attuned and kind to ourselves and each other. we won't be in a fight, flight, and freeze all the time. And that's something that we can do now as well, is really work on regulating. And then what happens when we're regulated and we trust people enough to connect with some of them and to stay away from others that aren't safe. Um, but also, I think some of our it's not possible to promote those kinds of systems that are harmful if we're connected with ourselves and we realize that we're connected with other people too, because we're hurting ourselves. And I think that will be something that becomes more and more evident. And I'm very encouraged by the amount of people that are doing mindfulness work, that are doing meditation, that are feeling inspired to teach this to other people, to connect with other people, like the summit that you're doing. You reach a lot of people, and a lot of those people are already engaged somehow. And then we learn more tools that might be just the thing that we need. And we get inspired by each other. So I think that inspiration that happens through having a kind, regulated nervous system, I think that will just kind of keep growing and growing. And I'm a big believer in justice and and that things could really keep getting better. The glimpses of that I've had in my own personal life over the last 30 years of meditating, if I extrapolate that out, I mean, that's amazing. And my life right now is there's a lot there's a lot of peace and a lot of joy and a lot of aliveness. And sometimes I sit around and watch Netflix, and a lot of times I don't. I'll go out and get into the forest or go for a walk at the beach or um yeah. So I think having a peaceful mind is a real blessing, and I think that will be more the common experience as we evolve into that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are such beautiful words, Lynn. And I loved your words there, having a kind, regulated nervous system. It resonated as so true to my body. And
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anybody use those words before. And of course, it makes sense because when we are regulated, we are kind.
Absolutely, we are. Yeah.
There's no reason not to be,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Yeah, absolutely. All right, beautiful one. So as we begin to close here, I invite all of us to take a breath back into our bodies, noticing what is alive for you in this moment. And for you, that might look like allowing your eyes to close, or if that's not feeling right or available for you in this moment, you can just let your eyes rest with a soft gaze on the ground or the wall. You might want to bring a hand to your heart space and belly or somewhere else that would like some contact, and simply take a moment of acknowledging once more that you are in an alive body. Noticing what's here, noticing what it's been like for you this past hour of being in this space with myself and with Lynn, and opening to these practices and these words about regulation and our body's capacity to heal, and coming home to who we are and being friends with ourselves and being kind to ourselves, and simply taking a breath with what's here for you in this moment. And it might be that for you, staying present right now simply with what you feel, or a general, perhaps delicious, perhaps somewhat edgy awareness of what's arisen in your body, in your mind over this past hour, is what's right for you. Just being and just noticing. Or it might be for you that there has been a clear aha in this session, that there has been a moment or more of realizing, oh, that's how I want to do it a little more deliciously in my life, or a lot more. Maybe there's something that you've realized about your work, your rest, your healing, your play, your eating, your socializing. It could be anything that you want to do in a way that feels more aligned with your body's needs, with your body's truth, with your body's desires. It's always just about doing the next right thing that feels guided by love. And so it is. And so it is. And so it is. Yeah. Oh, Lynn, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure for me too. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
And to all of you taking part today, I wish you such a beautiful onward journey with your body, and I'll see you soon.